You know, funny thing happened this morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table, just watching the birds out by the feeder, same as I do most days, when all of a sudden, I caught the smell in the air. Apple pie. Fresh, warm apple pie, cinnamon, brown sugar, and that flaky crust just barely golden. My neighbor Judy must have been vacuuming again. But Lord have mercy, that smell hit me like a freight train. I wasn't sitting at my table anymore. I was back in Mama's kitchen. 1961, hot summer air blowing through the screen door. A pie cooling on the windowsill. And I was just a little girl with scabbed knees and two big socks falling down around my ankles. It's strange how memories work, isn't it? You can go years, decades even, without thinking about a thing, and then, wham, you're right back in it. You feel the linoleum floor under your feet, hear the radio playing Hank Williams low in the background, taste that first bite of crust when it's still too hot to chew. And sometimes the memory ain't about the pie at all. It's about what happened before it came out of the oven. Or right after. That smell, it didn't just bring me back to a day. It brought me back to a night. A night I spent trying not to breathe too loud. A night I realized grown-ups didn't always mean safe. You know, I've lived a long life. Raised kids. Buried friends. Grown gray in the same house I once dreamed of running away from. And I've told a lot of stories over the years. Some funny, some sad. But there's one I've never told. Not out loud, anyhow. I kept it tucked away like an old photograph you don't dare look at too long. I always told myself it wasn't the right time. Or maybe I was just afraid y'all would look at me different. But lately, I've been thinking, maybe holding onto it all these years didn't protect me like I thought it did. Maybe, just maybe, Sharon, it might set something loose. For me. Or maybe even for you. You young folks probably think us old women spend all day talking about our gardens and grandbabies and church fake sales. And don't get me wrong, I love my roses and I sure love my babies. But we carry things too. Heavy things. Things we weren't allowed to name back then. Things that make your throat tight even after 50, 60 years. Back in my day, we didn't have therapists. We didn't have words like trauma or emotional abuse. We just had closed doors and too many secrets. We made do with what we had. And we didn't talk. That was just the way things were back then. But tonight, well, tonight I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna open that door I kept shut tight for most my life. I'm gonna tell y'all the truth about what happened in that house. About my daddy. About my mama. About the silence that screamed louder than any belt cracking through the air. I don't know if it'll make a difference. Maybe you'll turn this off and go back to scrolling. Or maybe you'll stay a while. Maybe you'll listen all the way through. Because if you do, if you really listen, you might see that behind every pie crust and Sunday dress, some of us were fighting battles no one saw. So here it is. The story I never meant to tell. The one that's been rattling around in my chest like a loose screen door in the wind. The one that starts with a smell and ends with me still wondering how much of that little girl I ever got back. Back then, we lived out on the edge of town where the pavement turned to gravel and the streetlights just gave up. You'd have to drive near half a mile before you saw another porch light flickering in the distance. Our house wasn't much. White paint peeling off the sides, one screen always hanging loose on the back door. Daddy said he'd fix it every spring, but somehow spring always came and went before he ever did. We had 3 rooms, 1 bathroom, a lean-in front porch where Mama used to sit and snap green beans into a big silver bowl. I still remember the creak of that porch swing and the way the wood would groan when Daddy stepped out onto it after a long day. I must have been about 8 when this memory comes from. Little thing, scrawny, all knees and elbows, always running around barefoot till Mama hollered I'd catch my death. I had this one dress I loved, yellow, with daisies on it that I wore near every Sunday. Sundays were special. We'd pile into Daddy's old Ford, and he'd curse the engine till it started. I'd sit between him and Mama, hands folded just so, trying not to breathe too loud. We'd drive out to the Baptist church with the tall white steeple and the preacher who always smelled like Old Spice and wintergreen mints. Church was the only time I saw Daddy smile like he meant it. He'd shake hands with every man in town like they were all good friends, and Mama would nod and say, "Mornin'," like she hadn't cried herself to sleep the night before. I didn't understand that back then. I thought grown-ups were just tired all the time. After church, Moma'd make fried chicken and cornbread, and sometimes, if we were lucky, banana pudding. I believe Sundays could fix anything. That if we just made it to Sunday, the world would be right again. That was the rhythm of things. School, chores, silence, Sunday. Repeat. We didn't have much. Lord knows we didn't. We didn't have a pot to pee in, like Daddy used to say, but Mama made things stretch. One pair of shoes for school, one for church. We made do with what we had. And most of the time, I didn't know we were poor not till the kids at school said something about my hand-me-down coat or the way my lunch smelled different. But I was a happy child, in the way kids can be happy without knowing the world is big and unfair and sometimes real cruel. I spent a lot of time in my own little world. I'd talk to the birds, write poems in a notebook I hid under the bed. I believed in angels, in second chances. I believed good people always came back, that if you were kind, the world would be kind back. I truly did. Sometimes I wonder if it was foolish, but I think maybe it was beautiful in its own way. That kind of faith, the kind you have before life gets too loud. I was just a girl then. I didn't know much about hate, or shame, or how some wounds don't show up till years later. And you know, I still remember the way the sun would hit the floor through the lace curtains in the morning. Mama used to hum while she made breakfast, and the sound of that humming, back then, meant everything was still okay. But that didn't last. The humming stopped. And the silence. Well, the silence came in like a fog you can't shake. And that yellow dress with the daisies. One day I stopped wearing it. Didn't feel right anymore. I didn't know it then, but the world was starting to crack. Just a hairline fracture. But it was there. And once you see the crack, you can't unsee it. I was still a child, but I was learning, and not the kind of lessons you get from books. I remember it like it was yesterday. Funny how some days don't feel important when you're living in, but years later, you realize everything started shifting right there. It was late July, hotter than a hen on a tin roof. The kind of day where the air gets thick and your hair sticks to the back of your neck no matter how many times you fan yourself. Mama had me picking green beans out back, and I was humming some tune from the radio. Something about that day felt off, though I couldn't tell you why. Just a whisper in my bones, I guess. Then Daddy came home early. That was the first strange thing. Daddy never came home before supper. Never. He worked long days at the mill, came home with grease on his shirt and anger in his eyes. But that day he pulled up in the truck round 3 in the afternoon, stepped out without saying a word. His face was all shadows, and he looked past me like I wasn't even there. I don't know what I expected him to say. Maybe something soft, something small. But there was a stillness about him I didn't recognize, like all the noise had gone inward. He walked straight into the house, didn't even take off his boots, and Mama went quiet as soon as she saw him. She wiped her hands on her apron and stood real straight. That's how I knew something was wrong. Now, let me tell you, my mama was a strong woman. Not loud, not flashy, but she had a backbone. She'd get up before the sun, scrub the floors on her knees, mend socks till her eyes went blurry. And she never, ever let me see her afraid. But that day I saw it. Just a flicker, in the way she held her breath, in the way her fingers trembled before she tucked M behind her back. I stayed real still outside the screen door, watching through the mesh. Didn't want to eavesdrop, but something kept my feet planted. Then he said it. Lost the job, he mumbled. Just like that. 3 little words that cracked something wide open in that kitchen. Mama didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just nodded real slow, like her neck was made of glass, and any sudden move might shatter her whole self. Then she turned and kept stirring the beans, even though they'd gone cold. Now, you might think that ain't much of a moment. Folks lose jobs all the time. But I'll tell you what, that day was the first time I felt fear wrap around our house like a wet blanket. Daddy's silence didn't feel quiet anymore. It felt loud, like thunder way off in the distance, rollin' in slow. Later that evening, he took his belt off and hung it by the back door like he always did. But there was something different in his eyes when he looked at me. Not drunk, not angry, exactly. Just hollow, like whatever was in him had been scooped out and replaced with something sharp. I couldn't explain it back then, but my heart beat faster when he walked past. Not in a loving way, not in a proud way, just fast, like it was trying to tell me something my brain didn't understand yet. And that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the fan clicking overhead, and I knew, deep down, that something had changed. The house felt different, quieter, meaner, like even the walls were holding their breath. I was still a little girl, but I wasn't innocent anymore. Not really. The world had tilted just a bit. And from that moment on, I watched my daddy like you'd watch a pot boil, waiting for it to spill over. I didn't know how bad it would get. I didn't know I'd carry the echoes of that day for the rest of my life. But I knew this. The light in our house had shifted, and no one seemed to notice but me. It was around that time I started pretending. You know, kids are smart. Smarter than folks give them credit for. We pick up on things. The hush in a room. The way a glass is set down just a little too hard. The way a voice dips low, real low, like thunder right before the lightning. I didn't have the words for it back then, but my body knew. My skin knew. My stomach knew. And every night, I'd lie in bed trying to make myself invisible, just real small under those thin covers, holding my breath when I heard his boots in the hallway. Things at home started shifting like slow-moving storm clouds. Daddy wasn't just tired anymore, he was angry, heavy, and not the kind that passed like a bad mood. It sat in his bones. It lived in the way he looked at me, like I was something that made his world worse just by existing. Mama, well, she changed too. She got quiet, eyes always darting, moving a little faster in the kitchen, stop in conversations mid-sentence when I walked in. Lord have mercy, the silence in that house could drown a person. I remember one night, I couldn't have been more than 9, I dropped a glass. Just slipped right out of my hands. It shattered on the floor and I froze. I mean froze. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it might crack my ribs. And I looked up at Mama and all she said was, "Go to your room." Not mad, not loud, just flat, like she didn't want to see what would happen next. And I did what I was told. Sat on the edge of my bed staring at the wall like it might disappear if I looked long enough. I remember thinking, this is what being bad feels like. This is what shame is. I didn't have the words then, but I remember the burn. Not from the glass, from inside. That night, Daddy didn't speak to me. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He just stood in the doorway for a minute, staring. That was all. And somehow that scared me more than if he'd yelled, because there was nothing in his face. Nothing. Like I wasn't even his. I started sleeping with my shoes on after that, just in case I had to run. Where to? I didn't know, but I figured it was better to be ready. Now, I ain't saying it was always bad. There were days that looked normal on the outside. We'd eat supper, watch the news. Mom'd hum again sometimes, but only real soft. But I stopped trusting peace. Started waiting for the next crack in the ground. At school, I'd smile, say yes ma'am and no sir and keep my papers neat. I didn't want nobody asking questions, didn't want them digging too close. And I sure didn't want no pity. That was the worst, being looked at like something broken. So I became good at pretending. Real good. My teacher, Miss Ramsey, she asked me once if something was wrong. I just shook my head and said I was tired. She looked at me a long time, then handed me a book to take home. I still remember the title, Charlotte's Web. I read it under the covers with a flashlight and cried when the spider died. I think that was the first time I cried for something that wasn't about me. And that's the thing. Nobody really knew. Not then. Not the neighbors, not the church folk. We kept it looking nice from the outside. We smiled. We cooked. We showed up. That's how we did it in those days. We kept our business behind closed doors. And the cost of that was silence. So what went wrong? Everything and nothing. He lost his job. He got meaner. Mama got smaller. And I got quiet. Too quiet. I started disappearing in my own house. That was the dilemma. Do you scream or do you survive? And I chose the only thing I could at 9 years old. I learned how to disappear. I remember the sound. Not loud, not like breaking glass or slapping doors. It was soft. A whisper almost. The kind of sound that shouldn't mean anything, but it did. It meant everything. It was the sound of the old wall clock in the kitchen, the one that ticked through every supper we ever had. That day it stopped. Just stopped. And I swear to you, so did my breath. It was mid-October, leaves scattering like paper memories across the yard. I'd just come home from school, shoes muddy, jacket 2 sizes too small. I opened the door and the house was too quiet. You ever feel a room before you enter it? Like the air's different, heavier? That's what it was. Thick with something I couldn't name yet. My hand gripped the doorknob tighter. I didn't even take off my shoes. Mama was sitting at the kitchen table, eyes red, hands folded in her lap like she was praying, but had already given up on God. Daddy wasn't in sight. The clock read 4:47. It still reads 4:47 in my memory. I asked what was wrong. She didn't answer, just looked past me. That's when I heard the footsteps upstairs. Heavy, unhurried, and then his voice. Low. Calling my name. Just once. I don't know why it hit me different that time. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was Mama's hands shaken ever so slight. But my legs went cold, like the blood left them. I turned and bolted out that door before I even knew I was running. I ran down the porch steps, past the fence, all the way to the edge of the woods. I don't remember breathing, don't remember crying. I just remember the ache deep in my chest, like my ribs were trying to hold my heart in. And I heard him call again, from far behind me this time, and for the first time in my life, I thought, if I go back, I won't come out the same. I stayed there till dark, hid behind an old tree where the bark peeled like skin, knees tucked tight under my chin. And it was then I realized Mama wasn't gonna come looking for me. Not that night. Maybe not ever. You know, there's a moment in every life where the world splits. Before and after. That was mine. Not some big explosion. No scream. No slap. Just silence. Just stillness. Just a girl crouched in the woods realizing she was on her own. I thought I'd cry. I didn't. I didn't feel nothing at all, and that scared me more than anything. That's when I stopped waiting to be saved. That's when I stopped expecting mama to see me or daddy to soften. Something closed that night, like a door inside me. I didn't go home till almost midnight. When I walked back in, the lights were off. They were both asleep, or pretending. The clock still read 4:47. I tiptoed past it, past them, and crawled into bed with my clothes still on. I remember staring at the ceiling so long, I started to see shapes in the cracks. And I whispered to myself real low, "Don't forget this. Don't ever forget this." Because that was the moment I lost her mama, not to death, but to something colder. Fear, maybe, or choice. That was the moment I knew I was no one's little girl anymore. And I swear to you, the house never ticked again after that. The days after, they all blurred together. One long string of mornings that didn't feel like morning and nights that didn't bring any rest. I still got up, still brushed my hair, still tied my shoes like nothing had changed. But inside, Lord have mercy, it was like someone had taken all the color out of me. I wasn't sad, exactly. Not angry either. I was just gone. Floating. I went to school. I smiled when the teacher called my name, answered questions, handed in my papers neat and tidy. But I don't remember a single lesson. Not one. What I do remember is watching the dust dance in the sunlight by the window and thinking how nice it must be to be dust. Light, unnoticed, free, at home. Everything looked the same. The rug still curled at the edges. The faucet still dripped in the bathroom. Mama still made cornbread every Thursday. But it wasn't the same house. Not to me. I moved through it like a ghost, careful not to make noise, careful not to be noticed. Because being noticed meant being in danger. Mama didn't ask where I'd gone that night. Didn't say a word about it. She just handed me a plate of food the next day like we hadn't both felt that clock stop. That was her way. Pretend it didn't happen, and maybe it didn't. I tried that too, for a while. Tried to pretend. But it was different for me. I remembered. And what I remembered, it sat in my chest like a stone. I stopped talking much, laughed less. I still played outside sometimes, but not with other kids. Just me and the trees and the wind. The birds didn't ask questions. The wind didn't judge. And somewhere along the line, I stopped hoping. Not in a dramatic way. Just quietly, like a candle that burns down on its own. No one blows it out. It just goes. I didn't believe people would come through anymore. Didn't believe kind words meant safety. I started thinking life was something to get through, not enjoy. Just keep your head down. Keep moving. That's when I started watching folks real close. The way their eyes moved when they lied. The way their voices changed when they were scared. I got real good at reading a room before I stepped into it. Real good at guessing what kind of day it was gonna be based on the way Daddy's boots landed on the porch. I wasn't a child anymore. Not really. Maybe I still looked like one. But inside, I was older than some grown folks. Older than Mama, even. She still believed in savant face, in quiet suffering. But me? I just believed in getting through the day. Some nights I'd lie awake and try to remember what it felt like to feel safe. Couldn't do it. That memory was gone. And still I stayed. Because what else was there? I didn't know any other life. Didn't know if it could be different. Didn't know if I deserved different. But I kept breathing. That was something. I kept getting up, brushing my hair, tying my shoes. Some days that was the only thing that made me feel real, that motion, that rhythm. I didn't cry anymore. I think my tears dried up around the same time my hope did. But the silence, that stayed. It followed me like a second skin. And I carried on. Not because I was brave, but because I had to. It wasn't a loud moment. No fireworks. No grand rescue. Just a Thursday afternoon, sky hanging low with the smell of rain and me sitting on the steps behind the school, waiting for the bus that was running late again. My knees were pulled up to my chest, and my sweater was too thin for the wind. I remember feeling small, not in the little girl kind of way, in the forgotten kind of way. That's when Miss Ramsey sat down beside me. My teacher. She didn't say much, just handed me a folded napkin with a biscuit inside. Still warm. Said she made too many that morning. I knew she was lying, but it was the kind of lie that felt like love. We sat there for a while. The bus still didn't come. And out of nowhere she said, "You don't talk much these days, sugar." I shrugged. Didn't want to explain. Didn't think I could if I tried. Then she said something I'll never forget. She said, "Sometimes when we don't talk, our pain starts talking for us in ways that hurt more." I didn't say nothing, but something in me shifted, like a small click way down deep. A door I thought was locked forever gave a little. That night, I wrote a letter. Just a short one. Not to anyone in particular. Just to the sky, maybe. I wrote, "I feel invisible, but I think I still matter." Then I tucked it inside the pillowcase. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The next day, I smiled at a girl in class. Her name was Teresa. She always had ribbons in her hair and smelled like lemon cookies. She smiled back. That was all. But it felt like a thread, a small string thrown out into the world, seeing if anyone might pull. After that, I started leaving little notes in library books. Just kind words. "You're not alone. It gets better. I see you." I never signed them. Didn't want credit. I just wanted someone, even one person, to feel seen in a way I hadn't. And slowly, I started feeling like I still had something inside me worth saving. Not because the world got kinder. Not because Daddy changed. He didn't. Not because Mama started singing again. She didn't. But because I did something. Small, sure. Quiet. But mine. It wasn't a second chance in the fairy tale way. But it was something close. A second breath, maybe. I didn't stop being scared. I didn't stop hunting. But for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel stuck. I remember standing by the window one night, looking out at the stars and whispering, "I'm still here." Not loud, just enough to hear myself say it. And that meant more than I knew. You see, second chances don't always come wrapped in change. Sometimes they come in response. In how we show up even when nothing around us does. That biscuit on the steps, that was the first warm thing I'd been given in weeks. And maybe Miss Ramsey knew. Or maybe she didn't. But that moment, that single, small kindness, lit something in me I thought was gone for good. And once a fire gets lit, even a tiny one, it don't take much for it to keep burning. There comes a moment, maybe not for everyone, but it came for me, when you realize the weight you've been carrying ain't just there because someone put it on you. It's there because you never set it down. And I had been carrying it a long time. My daddy's silence. My mama's looking away. All the words I never got to say. All the ones I whispered into pillows, hoping the night might swallow 'em whole. I was older then. Not grown, but not a child either. Somewhere in between. I had a summer job cleaning rooms at the old motel off Route 7. Weren't glamorous work, but it paid me just enough to buy a second-hand bike and keep my notebook full of fresh pages. I wrote a lot that summer. Wrote like I was trying to wring the poison out. One day, while cleaning one of the back rooms, I found an old Gideon Bible in the nightstand drawer. Pages were yellowed, cover was cracked. I don't know what came over me, but I sat down on that squeaky mattress and flipped it open. Not looking for God. Exactly, just something. And there it was, right there on the page. She is clothed with strength and dignity, and she laughs without fear of the future. I didn't laugh. Not yet. But I felt something move, like my bones remembered I was still alive. That night I went home, pulled out a box from under my bed, the one where I kept letters I never sent, drawings I made when I was little, even the yellow dress with the daisies, all folded up like it might still hold who I used to be. I carried that box out back behind the shed, dug a hole and buried it, every piece of it. And as the dirt hit the cardboard, I said out loud, real quiet, but clear, I forgive you. I didn't say who. Maybe it was Mama. Maybe it was Daddy. Maybe it was me. But something cracked open in that moment. You see, I used to think forgiven meant saying it didn't hurt, like I was letting them off the hook. But now I know better. Forgiven ain't for them. It's for you. So you don't have to keep walking around with fire in your chest and splinters in your soul. I walked back inside and stood in front of the mirror. Just stood there looking. And I said, "You're still here." And that meant something. I didn't magically become whole. I didn't float into happiness. But I decided. I chose to keep going. Without bitterness. Without begging. I chose to live a life that wasn't built on what they took from me. I stopped waiting for Mama to say she was sorry. Stopped waiting for Daddy to be someone he never was. I started living like I deserved peace, even if I had to build it myself. And let me tell you, that was the bravest thing I ever did. Not leaving. Not surviving. Destined to live without carrying it all forever. That's the real choice. And I made it. Time has a way of sanding down the sharpest edges. What once felt like it would cut me in half, now just lives as a scar. I still feel it sometimes, when the weather shifts or when a certain song plays on the radio. But it don't own me no more. That little girl I used to be, she's still here. Not the same, Lord knows, but here. And maybe that's the biggest miracle of all, that I didn't vanish. That I'm still breathing, still learning, still loving in my own way. I look around now, this old porch, my faded rocking chair, the way the light falls through the trees in the afternoon, and I think about how far I've come without even realizing it. There was a time I thought survival was the best I'd ever get. But over the years, I found pieces of peace in places I never expected, in a garden, in a grandchild's laughter, in the smell of fresh coffee at dawn. I used to believe that strength meant holding it all in. Keeping quiet, keeping still. But that's not strength. Not really. Strength is speaking when your voice trembles. It's getting out of bed when your heart is heavy. It's loving people even when love wasn't what you were taught. It's choosing joy on days it don't come easy. You know, folks always say time heals everything. I don't believe that. Time don't heal, truth does. Choice does. Time just gives you space to decide what to do with the hurt. I chose not to build a home out of mine. I packed it up and kept walking. Some days I limped. Some days I crawled. But I moved. And maybe you're sitting there right now carrying something heavy. A name you don't say out loud. A pain you keep tucked behind your smile. And maybe you've been waiting for someone to say sorry, for the past to rewrite itself, for justice, for closure, for peace. But let me tell you something, as a woman who's waited too long, maybe it's time to stop waiting. Maybe peace ain't coming in the way you imagined. Maybe it's not a feeling handed to you. Maybe it's a choice you make. Every day. Maybe the healing you're hoping for starts when you stop asking why it happened and start asking what you'll do with what's left. I don't have all the answers. I'm not here to preach. Lord knows I've made my share of mistakes. But I know this. You don't have to carry it alone. And you sure don't have to carry it forever. You can let go without forgetting. You can forgive without pretending it didn't hurt. You can move forward without getting over it. That's the part no one tells you, that grief and joy, sorrow and laughter, they live right beside each other. You just have to learn how to hold both. And if no one ever told you before, let me be the one. You matter. Even with the cracks, even with the quiet, even with the years that tried to break you. So, if you're looking for permission to move on, consider this it. Maybe, just maybe, it's time you stopped waiting too. Well, I suppose if you've made it this far, you deserve the truth, not just the story, but the why behind it. I didn't sit down to tell you all this just to unearth old ghosts or stir the ashes. I told it because sometimes speaking something out loud gives it a different weight, a lighter one. And maybe, just maybe, if someone out there's been carrying their own story, too afraid, too ashamed, too tired, they'll hear mine and say, if she could tell it, maybe I can, too. You know, I used to think my life was a quiet one, unimportant, no headlines, no applause, just dishes and dust and 100 little Thursdays that no one remembered but me. But now I see there's something sacred in that. Survival in its own soft way is holy. Kindness in the midst of pain, that's power. And telling the truth, even when your voice shakes, well, that's the bravest kind of love I know. I've lived long enough to know that not every story gets a neat little bow at the end. People don't always say sorry. Pain don't always get fixed. Some wounds stay tender no matter how many years pass. But that doesn't mean your story ends broken. It just means it ends honest. And if you ask me, honest is better than perfect any day. So what do I want for you, dear heart, wherever you're watching from? I want you to feel seen. I want you to know that whatever you've lived through, whatever you've lost, you're still here. And that matters. Maybe more than you think. Maybe you had a daddy who didn't know how to love. Maybe your mama looked away when she should have held you tighter. Maybe you've walked through fire and come out smoking on the other side. Or maybe, you're still in the fire. If so, let this be a light. A small one, but yours. Sometimes I sit out here on this porch, tea gone cold in my cup, and I think about him, the man my daddy could have been, the mama I wish had smiled with her eyes. And I wonder, even now, did they remember? Did they lie in bed at night, thinking of me the way I used to pray for them? And you know, sometimes I swear I feel it, a breeze that touches my cheek just so, or a dream where I see their faces softer than I ever knew them. And sometimes I think, maybe they do remember. Maybe in their own quiet way, they always did. But I can't know, and maybe that's okay. So now I leave this with you, not as advice, not as wisdom, just as a woman speaking plain. Are you still waiting for someone to make it right? Or is it time you started living anyway? Think on that a spell. Because at the end of the day, this story, it ain't just about what happened then. It's about what still echoes now. And maybe, just maybe, you've got a story of your own that's ready to be told. I'll be listening if you ever do.